Good morning, Shazza. How you doing?
Well, hi. It's great to see you.
It's good to
Now,
see you too.
I forget what your Aussie name is.
Oh, Simo.
Simo, like Simo.
Simo, I believe. I think that's how
Okay,
it's
then.
spelled. But yeah, what else has there been? No, that's pretty much it. Simo is pretty much all you can do with Simon. So, how are you?
All good. Spring has sprung here, and um, I it's externally spring, and it's springtime in my heart.
That's good. That's good. Tell me more. Springtime in your heart. You're just feeling alive, like you're on the right path. Things are going well.
Yes, I think in spite of myself, my will has been conformed to nature.
That's awesome. Maybe
I've
we'll
been
have to,
behaving myself as a
yeah.
stoic, always wanting to be the renegade, but this
That's so funny.
helpful. Yeah.
It is nice when we're able to fall into some sort of moral obedience to ourselves or whatever, that kind of yeah, it's I often find that happens when I'm very engaged in something, something important. It seems to, what it feels like? It kind of feels like the thing that is extremely important that you're working on is like a bowling ball dropped on a bed and everything falls into that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like things fall into it around you, and you don't tend to look for external gratifications as much because you're focused on that thing. You know what I mean? I'm sure you do because you've had that with many things in your life.
Well, it this is a new analogy for me, but I understand exactly what you're
Hopefully.
talking about. No, it's a very important idea because it's an important experience. It's it's when it's really when you feel like you're doing life right. I don't
Hmm.
mean to speak for you, but I mean in an analogy that I think of, and tell me if I'm hitting the mark or not. Um, when I'm reading a book, sometimes I fully enter the text,
Hmm.
and I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that except it, it's not just being lost in the story. It's being kind of in perfect dialogue with the ideas.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I think I've had a couple of experiences similar to that in the past year. One of them was with a video. It was a Jordan Peterson lecture, and he was combining the mythological substructures of like the Buddhist story of enlightenment with the Garden of Eden. And I had listened to this particular lecture about probably two or three times before that. But then on the third or fourth time, I finally was understanding, and from start to finish, everything that he was saying, I was finally following because it was such a complex lecture. And
Yes.
and then you find that you're just everything, you're like, yes, okay, I get it, okay, I get it, okay, I get it, and then there was another experience that I had with this book that I'm reading from Carl Jung, two essays on analytical psychology, and he uh, I actually wanted to quote you something today from here, which we can do briefly as well. But I had highlighted, as I read a book, I highlight certain passages. But then when I started reading the book again and going through from the point where I had stopped, I thought, no, let me just jump back and read one thing that I highlighted to see if I understand it a bit better. Because obviously my mind caught that in some way, you know, like I better go back and review it. And then all of a sudden, the highlighting didn't matter, because every idea after the highlighting, the things that I didn't highlight, I was like, oh, I can't believe I didn't see this. I can't believe I didn't see this and this and this. And it just reminded me to go back and review the things, you know, review the points that, you know, you've highlighted, because there's an importance there that you might not have caught properly. And then you see the things that you didn't highlight, you know. But Jung is
Yes.
a psychopath, you know, trying to understand his works. It's impossible.
You're a brave man.
And look, I'm trying. He's been really, you know, really influential over the past few weeks, because I've just started jumping into. Have you read any of Jung's stuff? Or
Oh yes. Oh yes. A lot.
I was sure you would have.
Especially, you know, the theory of dreams. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was I was going to suggest that I tell you a crazy dream that I had the other day, but maybe that's for later on in the conversation if I choose to. But yeah, that his stuff about dreams is so interesting, and yeah, it'd be interesting to have that discussion with you as well. Like, what have you found useful about his works on dreams and their interpretations? Have you found that you've used it in your life with your own dreams?
Yes. So not recently, but the most important thing that I gained from immersing myself in Jung's ideas is that I share his fierce conviction that we are fundamentally symbolic creatures, that that cognition and memory and emotion are basically the elements are symbols. And well, in fact, you know, there's that whole field. Have you ever explored semiotics, the study of signs and sign systems and symbols? That's actually a whole discipline that looks at all fields of study through the lens of symbolism. And it actually, in the hierarchy of knowledge, it sees linguistics as being a subset of semiotics, because I'm sorry, I don't mean to be getting all pedantic on you, but anyway.
No, this is great. This is great.
I just think that the atoms of our thoughts are symbols, and that maybe, and this is just a hypothesis, a guess, a if you will, that that maybe dreams are a glimpse of that more atomistic level, rather than the synthetic level that we deal with in our workaday lives, where we don't have time to parse out all the symbolic components of any given moment of life, you know, both the inputs and what's inside of us, you know, because we have to move from here to there. We have to, you know, make all these micro decisions to navigate our days, our moments. But maybe dreams are just a little peek behind the curtain at that
Mm.
more atomic. Anyway, I
No, no,
maybe
this
that's
is no,
my
this
flight
is
of fancy, but I don't know.
I love it. And
Uh,
I have to say, I just clicked record from the start because I knew we would just go into some deep topics. All right.
you rascal.
I wanted to catch you before before we do all the good stuff first. But yeah, you know, this is such good timing to talk about this sort of stuff because one of the YouTubers I've been absolutely obsessed with in the past few weeks has been Jonathan Pajot or Paggio. He's this wonderful icon carver from Canada, and all of his videos are based around the symbolism of the biblical stories, and you know, talking about this exact sort of stuff in terms of showing you how everything that you do in your life has a symbolic substructure, you know, and so
Right, right.
yeah, all this stuff, you know, I'm only coming to this stuff via the back road of Jordan Peterson's lectures because he's talking, you know, he does interviews with Jonathan Pajot and he's talking about the biblical symbolism and about Carl Jung. And so I've been thinking, okay, well, I've listened to him enough. It's time to go to the source of his thinking as well. And, you know, going to Carl Jung, and it's just it's blowing my mind, you know, just it is so interesting to think
Pardon me.
about. Well, bless you. I don't. That's not the right thing to say, but I always say it anyway. um, but yeah, just it has really opened my mind to uh, the complexities of what's going on beneath what I think I am. You know, and
Yes,
and I think that that can
exactly.
only be a good thing. You know, in the long run, to be acquainted
I
more with those complexities.
I think so. And I have a hunch that they're beautiful.
Hmm.
Just a hunch, but I trust my hunches.
Yeah.
I
Well,
give them a lot of cred. You know, I just have one quick
please.
anecdote, you know, just about um, as you put it so well, the symbolic substructure of, well, everything.
Hmm.
Um, I was talking recently, my oldest daughter uh, completely surprised my family, and she became a rabbi many years ago. And it's interesting because her father was a Jesuit, and you know, it's complicated. Um, but you know, she came from a fairly agnostic family. Anyway, I was talking with her a while ago, and her name is Kayla, and I said, Kayla, listen, you know, what about that Bible? You know, that thing really pulls my chain. I mean, you know, do I have to listen to all these men and then Benjamin begat Abraham and blah, blah, blah. And then this man saw a burning bush and then he took to him a concubine and blah, blah, blah. You know, in other words, you know, I was having you know, a feminist fit. And, I said, how, you know, because she's, you know, a very modern person and very progressive minded. I said, how do you deal with all that stuff? I mean, and she said, oh, Mom, are you only looking at the plot? And what she meant by that is that it's all a system of symbols, that it's a code for us to decode. And
Hmm.
that's how I'm putting words into her mouth, but I know that's what she was trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is. It's such a freaky document, right? Like
Yes.
it, and I think that over the past year, I've really come to realize just how stupid I am in relation to my previous thoughts about religion and the Bible, particularly because it's my upbringing, you know, and even
Yeah.
thinking about um, it's even changed the way that I look at my actual religious upbringing in the Mormon church, because they have another book called the Book of Mormon, which is, again, a series of stories. And if you look at it for the plot, you're going to very quickly realize that I'm not sure if any of this really happened, not really quite sure if that really happened, but I'm interested in rediscovering the symbolic meaning behind it. But I've had just these experiences where I thought, okay, I have to at least go back and see if I find something in here. And so I'd read the Bible and I thought, there's some very strange symbolism that seems to pertain exactly to me in this moment of my life. Things like that, where you think,
Yes.
it's just, I've really come to realize that I know absolutely nothing about that document, and it's just not something that we can, frivolously, throw to the wayside, and be confident in. It's yeah, it deserves a degree of seriousness. And so, yeah, in my path of learning, I think once I'm done with Seneca, I'm going to have to start diving a little bit deeper into that stuff, because it's far beyond me to understand that.
Yes.
Hmm. But I wanted to okay, I want to read you something, because we were discussing last time the kind of lessons learned from last year. Well, apparently I'm still going through puberty, because I'm still having the but yeah, so last year, one of the things that I was really thinking about, and I actually wrote a little bit about this, and posted it as a podcast, but I was thinking about how, if we imagine ourselves to be the highest of the high, in terms of the hierarchy of uh, things in this world, right? We can. It's very easy to fall into the very materialistic worldview of, this is just what is. What I can see and what I can touch is just what is. And I don't think that there's like a lot of confidence in that kind of way of thinking, in terms of confidence in yourself to be able to navigate effectively throughout the world. And it's such a new way of thinking as well. And I started to really think about, okay, well, what's bigger than me? Well, culture is definitely bigger than me. That's something that's lasted thousands and thousands of years and is constantly in development, that I have a tiny little bit to do with, but ultimately it's much bigger and much more powerful than I am. And so maybe that's something that, if I pay attention to culture, then there's a wisdom to be found within that. And then you think the Stoic worldview is, okay, we'll go even bigger than that. You're not just a citizen of your nation, you're a citizen of the cosmos, meaning get that view from above, the cosmic view of the reason that exists throughout the, you might say the Taoist view of the flow of life, right? Like the way that things go. And so I started really thinking, okay, I need to extend my view of what I am in order to gain a deeper wisdom of what's happening around the world, right? Because if you just look at what's in front of you and what's around you, there is wisdom to be gained there, but it's somewhat shallow. And then as I was reading Jung, he kind of confirmed this idea for me, and I want to read this to you. It was so interesting. When I read this, I thought, damn, Jung is he's too much. But he was basically, in this essay, he's talking about how, and this is also such a brilliant idea, that the kind of floodgates of morality every so often will burst, right? And the way that they burst is often through the sexual question. We definitely see today, everybody is talking about, sexuality and things like that. Like there's definitely there's a theme reoccurring, which he just hits on the head perfectly here. But he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, it is the way of moralists to put little trust in God, as if they thought the fair tree of humanity flourished only by virtue of being propped up and trained on a trellis, whereas Father Sun and Mother Earth have allowed it to grow for their delight in accordance with the deepest laws of wisdom. The laws of the deepest wisdom. And I couldn't get over that last line there for the past few weeks. It's just been, going over and over in my mind, the laws of the deepest wisdom, and he's talking about Father, Son, Mother Earth. He's talking about getting that cosmic view of not what do we want, but what is the thing that is going to be happening for millennia to come, and how can you view the events of the world right now from the lens not of the next 20 years, but, the next 1,000 years, the next million years. It's just these patterns that you see over time. And I wanted to ask you what you think of that, because you're obviously a deep thinker. You've got a different view. I don't take you for a standard materialist. You've got obviously a connection to a deeper kind of wisdom. What do you take away from something like that, like gaining a deeper wisdom of the cosmos?
What that puts me in mind of is a thing we can do that I think is the portal to philosophy, in the strictest sense, the love of wisdom. I think the best thing we can do, the kindergarten of philosophy, the kindergarten of wanting access to the big everything, the wisdom, is to go outside and lie on our backs and stare into the sky. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. Enough time to let our workaday thoughts dissipate. And you look at the shifting clouds and you look at how big that sky is. And you remember from grade school that you were taught there were these planets. And there's this Milky Way, which is like just a little dust mote on a dandelion of God knows what bigger thing.
Yeah.
And eventually what happens is, I think if this works, is that you get beyond thought and you get beyond categories. And you have a kind of direct experience, number one, of the vastness of experience, also from the beginning of time, if there even is such a thing, to now, to infinity. What you get is pure awe. What you get is pure awe. And I think that's the beginning of any honest inquiry. Anyway, that's
beautiful. Yeah. You use the word awe. I was thinking recently along the same terms, but using the word grandeur. I think that we need to experience a sense of grandeur as often as we can, whether that's, staring at a beautiful painting that gives you that sense of just, I don't understand this and it's impossible to understand it completely, but there's something trapped within there, the vastness of that meaning. Or whether it's climbing a mountain, or like Seneca did, walking through a forest and realizing that, how could there not be something greater, than this little mind here, right? And I think that yeah, I'm so grateful that I grew up in a place where I had the opportunity to go out and climb mountains every weekend, and to just sit there on top and, you know, look down at how small everything is. It's still, you know, it's like that exercise from Marcus Aurelius, right? The view from above, you look down and you think, oh, okay, so when I'm in a car, that's how tiny I am. You know, just driving on the highway, a tiny little toy car driving along with all of my problems, all of the things that I worry about. And at the end of the day, there's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of deeper meaning to be found. And I think that's something that gave me a little bit of confidence was hearing Alan Watts. He said, we always think that we come into this world, but we came out of it, you know, and
Yes,
just
a
to
very
remember,
important distinction. Very
yeah,
important
yeah,
distinction.
just to remember
Yes.
that whatever I am is just as much a part of everything that's around me, you know, and a part of the world, and so you think back to what Marcus Aurelius said again, which is, you know, remember that you will face this day with the same reason that you had yesterday and the day before and the day before that and the day before that. And then you remember that you come from a long line of people who managed to survive this world and obviously thrive because you're here, and you wouldn't be here if they didn't thrive in some way. And yeah, I think this is one of the things that I'm interested in rediscovering about Stoicism, is this kind of cosmic confidence that you get when you identify yourself with the largest possible thing that you could conceive of, if that makes sense.
Yes, because then you know that even though you're a wee itty bitty little piece of it, that you have your place, and it was inevitable that you would be, because of all the antecedent um, events that
Yeah,
led to the inevitability of you, except you're just a little teeny weeny itsy bitsy, it's, you know,
yeah.
infinitesimal, etc. But, you know, I just wanted to highlight something that you just said a couple sentences ago, because it it was the missing piece of, you know, this idea of getting direct access to, uh, eh, uh, to, I don't know, to kind of the ground of our being in a way.
Mm,
Um, but the other part of it is, that I neglected to say, but you said it, is not only do you realize, not as a concept, but as a profound experience, the vastness, the infiniteness of it, but you see how everything is interconnected.
mm.
And that, and and I would add that those connections are the filaments that connect us, are, they're they're all symbols. They're all, in a sense, messages. Uh,
Well, you know, let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because that's, I think it's such an important point that we need to tease out here, which is, you know, I think it relates as well to the idea of Amor Fati, right? But the thing that we
oh
are
yes,
talking about is the precursor to a true understanding of Amor Fati, right? So you need
yes,
to be able to recognize the interconnectedness of everything. You need to be able to recognize uh, the connection that you have to the whole, right? In order for you to even be able to see how things could be good for you if you decided to identify with the highest possible good, or, you know, the highest possible aim of good. And so you say, well, basically, Amor Fati, love your fate. I'm going to act as if this crazy, giant, interconnected cosmos that I'm playing a part in, I'm going to act as if it is good. And
Yes.
and as I do that, I will welcome whatever happens to me uh, as a pathway for me to walk on, right? And I can honestly say, you know, the past year, I've only just started to really play with that idea of love your fate, and it simply works. You know, I think the point when I really realized how I didn't understand it, but how I could understand it, was when I said, this is no different to what they taught me in church when I was younger, which was to follow God's plan for you, or act as if
Yeah.
whatever happens to you could be good. And people would get up in church and they'd say, I'm so grateful for my trials. And and you know, me and my parents, they'd always be like, listen, nobody's grateful for their trials, but okay,
Roll with it. Yeah.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
point is, you know, you act as if whatever is happening to you could be for your benefit, and it works for people. And so why would you be so prideful and arrogant as to you know, to push against that, you know, just because it's a way of thinking, right? Like, it's a tool of thinking, but it works, you know, it works. And I think uh yeah, as I have tried to expand my vision of what it is that I'm a part of here in this crazy universe, and as I have played with that idea of Amor Fati, I think that ultimately I have been picking up these clues along the trail and say, okay, well, I can take that, and I can take that, and I can take that.
Right.
And yeah, it's strange, right? Have you found that as well in your life?
Oh, uh, ab- absolutely. Yes. And it, well, I'm just reminded of uh, how I think uh, Amor Fati can be misunderstood as being just going paws up,
Yeah.
right? But it's actually kind of the most engaged way you can be with your life, because there's that simultaneous understanding that you're you since we're such a tiny part of the fabric of everything, that we're just not so effing important, you know, as we'd like to think we are. But at the same time, we are really effing important, and that
Mm.
and our lives do have consequence, because we've got a job to do in our
Mm.
little itty bitty space. It and we and by taking on the mentality of Amor Fati, that's that's an in a way it's an exception. It's an acceptance, I beg your pardon, of our duty to fully inhabit ourselves, this moment, this kind of blessed accident called us.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that, I think this is such an important point that is so necessary to go down as well, which is that you have to pair that recognition uh, um, of this love of fate with a recognition of your duty as well. You know, meaning, if everything around me in this crazy cosmos seems to have some kind of purpose, does something which adds to, you know, the higher levels upon which are built from it, that didn't make sense, but if everything has some sort of strange purpose, then maybe there's something about me that, if I was able to listen to the path that is being set for me, then I would see that there is a part of me that needs to emerge. And if it does emerge, then it adds and contributes in the way that I need to. And if it doesn't emerge, then well, then we go back to, because this is a difficult element, right? Because then you think, well, if we're talking about the deeper wisdom of the cosmos, there are going to be people who emerge and, fulfill their duties. And then there are people who obviously have a rough time finding that, and they don't find it, or they don't, you know, even if they do find it, unable to commit to that ultimate duty, right? And so you think, well, if there's the deeper wisdom of the cosmos, I'm just playing with an idea here, this may go nowhere, then everything is good about that. Like everything is fine, and so you focus on yourself, and you suspend judgment of what everybody else is doing, but you take that load, that weight of, your culture and, the things that you're trying to contribute to, you take it upon yourself, right? And you focus there. If does that kind of make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, Simon. And I'm kind of tickled right now, because what you've just said surprised me by being expressed in a prayer that I remember from childhood, which I was raised as a Jew, and so we would pray in Hebrew, but it translates as this: I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize that I'm beautiful and whole, that I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. That sense of showing up to your part in the gigantic play.
Yeah. What I really like about that is we've been talking about a few kind of there's a tension in some of the things that we're saying, because one thing that I really like about that prayer is that it gives you, okay, one thing that it's so hard to find a sense of belonging in life, right? And we're constantly seeking that belonging and that feeling that we are it, we are the thing, that we need to fall into and we need to discover. And I think that the unhealthy manifestation of that worldview tends to be, to me, it seems like the view that, well, I'm just perfect the way I am, and so any faults that I have, I can just throw to the way. It's all good. I'll just do whatever I want. I'll live it up in life, and I don't have to worry about ever becoming something other than what I am, right? But it seems like that's the wrong path. But what that prayer also gives you is, well, I'm a little broken too. I really like that, because it gives you a little bit of humility to say, okay, yes, I'm whole. However, there's work to do. And I think that it's a good balance. It's like what Epictetus said. I use this with my clients all the time, and it's seriously one of the most helpful things I ever heard. He said, personal growth should come from a place of personal self-scrutiny and also self-kindness. And if you match them together, which it's hard to do, but if you match them together, it's life is fun. Sorry. It's like it's good,
Yeah, it's good.
So I don't know if I need some water, but I'm like choking on my breath
today.
Let's
have water break.
Now, I wanted to add something as well, because one of the things that I wrote down that I really wanted to talk about in terms of lessons from last year, and it really relates to what we've been talking about, is I started to pay attention to the fact that people around me were sending me messages constantly because uh, they know me in many ways better than I know myself. You know, they're watching me from the outside view and they're thinking, well, he's thinking about this, or he's thinking about that, or he's got this talent or this talent, so he might like this or this or this. You know, it's like when somebody recommends a book to you, or, you know, I had people last year recommend that I have some guests on the show, and the guests who they recommended, who I ended up interviewing, were some of the most influential people I had on the show in terms of, for me, you know, I really took something away from it important. And then, you know, I started checking out these books that people were recommending, or even just paying attention to, you know, when I was younger, what were the things that people were saying to me, like, you should do this or you should do that. And I started to really open up that kind of that world of paying attention to the the things that you're hearing, the lessons that you're learning from the people around you in terms of who you are. And as I opened that up, I thought, man, this is amazing. You know, people really do often know me better than I know myself, and the recommendations to me are always just spot on for where I am in my life. And I thought that really relates to the Amor Fati as well, right? Because what I would often do is I would, you know, somebody would recommend a book, or, you know, somebody would recommend it a guest, and I think, well, I know better than they do. I'm just going to keep on my path, you know. I'll keep these blinders on. And when I started actually paying attention, I thought, man, you know, one of my clients, he recommended that I read Montaigne, and I just read the introduction and I was like, oh crap, this is exactly what I'm needing at this point in my life. You know, I can't believe it took me so long to, you know, to get to this point. So I don't know, like, do you obviously get a lot of recommendations from people, right? And have you found that, have you found often that people tend to know you better than you can see yourself when they uh when they point things out to you, or like, I'm not sure.
I I don't know how to answer that right now, just because of COVID. I really haven't been around people
Mm.
too much. I would need to think about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
And I'm not even sure if I phrased it in a question. It was more of a avalanche of words coming in your general direction. But
Yes.
but it's, yeah, it's definitely something to consider. You know, I just really found that last year that it was very strange to me how the recommendations that people started throwing my way just hit the nail on the head every time. And going back to what we've been talking about, if you act as if there could be something of value in those things, you know, that it seems like you will see that. And I think just also just paying attention to the messages that I was taught growing up in terms of what people saw in me that they thought would be a good direction. And often we can think, yeah, like I said, you know, we can think, well, I'm just going to stick on my path, I'm going to do that. But um, it's strange how we as humans, we are constantly sending messages to other people about what we think they should be or could become. You know, it's like, fulfill
Oh,
your
yes.
potential. You know, what does that even mean? It means that somebody sees something in you that you might not see within yourself, and that if you listened to them and tried to fulfill that potential, whether it's somebody saying, hey, you know, you're good at this, or you're good at that, or you should check this out, you might be interested, um, it can really change your direction. And now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I remember sitting outside of these markets when I was younger, playing my trumpet, busking for some money. It sounds like I was homeless or something. I had parents. I was just sitting there making some extra money, but this guy came
Good.
along and he said, you know what, you sound a little bit like Chet Baker. You should check him out. And
Oh, pivot point.
pivot point,
It's, yeah,
seriously,
yeah.
when
Excuse me for interrupting, but I know that
no,
was a pivot point.
it
That
was a pivot
ding,
point,
ding, 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 ding. Yeah,
and so
yeah,
when I listened
yeah,
to that, I thought, oh, okay, I'll go check it out. And as soon as I heard it, I thought, oh, this is my jazz. This is my
yeah.
style that I love. And I ended up doing a tribute album to Chet Baker, and I think if that guy hadn't have had the inclination to come up to me and say, hey kid, check out Chet Baker, how different would my life be? And so it goes both ways, right? We need to recognize how those influences are coming in upon us, but we can also be that for somebody else, and it's necessary. Something really necessary about that.
Yes. Yes. Everything you've just said, Simon, of it is an affirmation of something I believe, which is life is always speaking to us if we would but listen. And it does come through people, but life can speak to us through circumstance or through anything. You see a commercial on TV, you look at a leaf from a Japanese maple. Everything can be the agent of that pivot point if we're listening. I mean, in other words, you pointed out that how terrific that guy bothered to say, hey kid, check out Chet Baker. But he needed you to catch the ball. You had to be listening. Life speaks, but there has to be a dialogue. It's a dialogue. We're speaking. And by speaking, I don't just mean literally with, verbal language, but through our body language, through the choices we make. And then we're part of the big mush that's life, that is also sending out signals, symbols, language to other people, that if they're open, then they can be galvanized in a good direction.
I think it's so necessary to see that as a conversation, and this really plays back into what we've been talking about. I'm so glad that we're going in this direction, because what we've done today is we've said, identify with yourself with the biggest possible thing, let that lead you into Amor Fati, love your fate, so that you'll see the opportunities. And then once you're there, you'll realize that you're getting these messages constantly, and you're, I think it's Viktor Frankl, he said, ask not what, oh gosh, what did he say? Just something along the lines of, ask what life is expecting of you, right? So to see what it is that life is calling you to do. And then you see that you have a duty to continue that conversation with life, which often manifests in, the conversations we have with people. But there's deeper and deeper layers of duty that you have in terms of having that conversation with life. And I think that something I've been really trying to grasp properly lately is I've had a very deep sense that the potential that I have for contributing in the highest possible meaningful way to my culture and to the people around me, that potential has not been perfectly realized. Oh, hello.
oh, sorry, I accidentally picked my thing. I'm just,
no, that's fine.
I beg it. I beg it.
But yeah, I think ultimately I've had this sense that there's so much more that that I am capable of responding to life with. There's such a bigger conversation to have, right? And I'm not having those conversations yet, but I'm heading in that direction. And sometimes I realize, man, I thought that I had this back then, but I wasn't even close. I'm so much closer now. And then you get a little bit closer, but I think that the more you can develop that, like you say, the conversation with life and responding to the call of duty that you have to the people around you to fulfill that potential. And, it really, and that's such a hard thing, because I think that it takes, it does take a lot of courage to act as if the things in your life and the messages you're receiving could be good, and you could turn it around to be of value for the people around you. It takes a lot of strength, and it's really hard to do. And that's why I say, I'm not even close to being, to having that giant conversation, but it's, I'm trying to figure out what it feels like exactly, because I've had inclinations. And as I'm figuring that out, I'm trying to think of how you can communicate that to other people, because it's such a necessary conversation to have. Go on, sorry.
Well, I was just thinking that I think we can communicate it to other people just by the way we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that, for a specific reason, because at some point over the past few months, I realized that the right feeling, so when you're progressing in life, and when you're making the right decisions, and when you tend to be going in the right direction, the right feeling to have is not necessarily pride as much as gratitude. Gratitude for the fact that you somehow managed to pick up the right signals, and somehow you've landed in this place where you're on a good path, right? But I look
Right.
back and I think, there's nothing that I could have done to have gone in a different direction, or I was just, I was just picking up the signals that were coming in, and so there has to be kind of like a humility there of, well, things will happen when they happen. I've just got to try and turn up the volume knob, and see if I can hear a little bit more, see a little bit more. And it also has a little bit to do with what I've been thinking about, when it comes to the purpose of philosophy, or the seeking of wisdom is, we are these information foragers constantly, and maybe one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is to turn up the dial on all of these senses that we have that can allow us to perceive the world around us as much as possible. And as you do that, you start to, the world shifts around you in different ways than it did before, because you're experiencing, whether it's what Jung talked about with deeper layers of wisdom, or you're just experiencing different layers of awareness and perception that allow you to take in greater volumes of signals. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. With the proviso
Yes.
that the broader band of signals I like to think of as being depth rather than breadth, because we don't want to live a mile wide and an inch deep. We
Yeah.
want to live an inch wide and a mile deep. In my opinion.
Is there an analogy there between what is often said in philosophy and religion in terms of the straight and narrow path?
Can you say more about that? I
Well,
want to understand what you mean better.
yeah, it's like Seneca has talked about the straight path, the straight way. It's also talked about something that I was taught, I guess, in Christian narratives, is the straight and narrow path, right? Of whether it's virtue or it seems like it's if I just got an image then of you talking about inch wide, mile deep, of something that goes extremely deep in terms of for wisdom's sake, but it also goes very high, right? Like it
Yes, yes,
like
right. In other words, we're the x-axis, not the y-axis.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think something I've been thinking about lately is just a kind of maxim of uh, aim higher, go deeper, sort of thing.
Yes, yes,
And I think that if you can do that, and it really resonates with me, because I think that the deeper I go into philosophy, the more difficult the questions are that I'm trying to answer about life, and the deeper the questions are that I'm trying to ask. And it's not as if I'm asking these questions, it's like they pop up and I'm like, oh crap, I have to deal
right,
with this. You know what I mean? Like
right.
now I've
Yes,
got to deal with the question
the
of God all of a
question is
sudden.
is asking you. I mean, yeah, I mean, we just become these instruments for the questions that insist on
Yeah.
being asked.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think it has to be a natural process where you kind of fall into that path, where you fall into uh, the necessity of asking those questions. Something that I wrote recently, I just had this strong sense that um, the question of God and what that even means, right, and what it means for us, is something that I think that everybody will at some stage in their life be forced into asking that question, whether it's now when I'm 27, or whether it's the day before I die and I realize that I have to consider, what does that mean? What does it mean that I'm going to die, and what happens? And I think that the sooner we can ask these deeper questions and have a sophisticated look at them, that might be the wrong word, a an honest look at these questions. I think that uh, like they always say, wisdom isn't a thing of age, it's a thing that you seek no matter where you are in your life. And if we can come to these questions naturally, before it's too late, I think that there's deep meaning to be found. I think, anyway, I get a sense.
Yes.
Hmm. So I have one more question for you, I guess.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you about art, because
Oh, good.
Jen and I just had a wonderful weekend. We went. She basically, she had all these flight credits because she couldn't go to America last year, and so we thought, let's take a trip. We went to Sydney. We saw Hamilton and Frozen, the musicals. It was just
Oh,
amazing. But I think that for me, one of the highlights was, last year I finally came to a realization that I'm so stupid when it comes to art. I had no idea. I never wanted to go to art galleries, and it's just, they bored the crap out of me. And
oh,
and then I started to develop a better relationship with it and think, okay, yeah, I don't know anything about art, and it's so much more intense and meaningful than I had realized. And one of the highlights for me on the weekend was going and seeing the Australian Art Museum, I think it was, and just the exquisite works that they had in there just blew me away. But you definitely are a person who, it seems to me, at least from the outside view, you have a deep connection with artistic beauty and yeah, cultural significance in those works. When did you kind of talk to me about your kind of relationship with art? When, how did it develop? How do what do you see in terms of the meaning to be found in art? I don't know, like, I might be wrong about anything here, but yeah, just talk to me about how you see art and its purpose in culture, I guess.
well, well, first start I'll start from the personal, and then
Sure.
branch out to maybe a more universal perspective. My relationship with art it's a bit fraught because my mother was a famous abstract artist, and I grew up in a home where, you know, all I smelled were the smell of paints, and she had a studio, and I didn't get it. You know, I just didn't get it. I didn't know how. The only all I could do was draw a stick figure. Mind you, she did abstract work, not figurative, but I didn't know why someone would want to make an image out of any medium. I wasn't hostile towards it, but there was just, you know, it's kind of like how there's some people who will insist that they're tone deaf. And if you're musical, I don't know about you, but I'll say to them, no, it's just a matter of exposure, of trying it, of you know, there's no such thing as tone deaf, or, you know, not being musical. It's, you know, it's our birthright, blah blah blah. Well, I don't know. But anyway, art just always, you know, I was, because of my mother's position in her community, and just because of the culture of the home I was raised in, I was taken to museums all the time, and they just made me feel stupid and like sort of a witless Philistine. I didn't get it. You know, I mean, I suppose I'm just in a way restating what you're saying, what you just said, you know, just I was, you know, especially abstract art, you know, you would see just some, you know, the classic reaction, my 3-year-old could do that, to, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And like, you know, well, that's a good gig if you can get it, you know, to throw some stuff. But talk about a pivot point. I would say about 10 years ago, más o menos, more or less, I was invited to be on a panel of, I don't know what, you know, they called it like a group of creatives from different fields or something. And what they did was they literally, it's pretty funny, they locked us in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art after midnight, you know, when there were no patrons, but just so that we would just have the run of this place. And I don't know, there were maybe 15 of us or something, people from all different walks of life, but everybody else there was artistically, you know, they were part of the cognoscenti, and I was sort of the dum-dum. Anyway, we were set loose, find a piece that spoke to us, and then to come back to the group later and explain why. And I forget the circumstance, but I know, I had a dulcimer gig in the city before I came to this funny event. So I had brought my hammered dulcimer with me, and anyhow, I came upon this painting that I stared at. I'm trying to remember the artist. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But I stared at it for, you know, I really sat with it for a while. And all I could think of was wanting to play music to say that. I mean, that was the language that I thought of to express, because I guess I'm not feeling articulate. Somehow the painting, it definitely spoke. It spoke, and I caught the ball. I received it. And then I broke out my dulcimer, and spontaneously, just all of a piece, a tune came out. That was the painting. You know, it was like, I guess, you know, kind of a synesthesia or something like that. But anyway, what's my point? My point is that I think we're all kind of fluent in different languages, and
yes,
and mine happens to be auditory, but I think we can still understand and be moved by other languages if we can be present for them. Okay, little asterisks to that story. About 4 years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an artist, and I was in her studio, and I said, well, gosh, how nice it is that you have this studio and you can make art and do something that means so much to you. And she said, well, here, would you like to, you know, make a little painting over here while I'm working? And I said, oh no, I don't do that. And then she got very stern with me, and she said, you aren't a person if you don't make art. You know, you don't have to make art for other people to respond to, but you know, you're being an idiot. You're cutting yourself off from something that makes you fundamentally human. And so, okay. So she gave me, okay. Anyway, fast forward, I paint every day now, and I draw every day now. And when I go to a museum, it's one of the most vibrant, exciting experiences I can imagine. So I think we can be switched on somehow.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed, Simon, because I think I got on my story train, and I'm sort of not even remembering the original question.
No, that's exactly the kind of response I was looking for. Well, not that I was looking for a specific response, but you know, it's beautiful, you know, and it's I love the way that you're thinking about it in terms of languages that we can tap into of expression. And I agree that some people may be better in one language than another. I definitely, like you, seem to be way more of the auditory kind of language speaker. And so one thing that I have been thinking lately is, you know, if I'm practicing philosophy and if I'm seeking to be a philosopher, there is nothing better that I could do for the philosophy than to explore these different forms of expression, like whether it's with my music or with, you know, I agree, you know, I've started doing drawings as well, and having such a great time discovering that language, even though I can only speak a few words at the moment. But you know, you add a new word each time and you start to think, okay, I can develop this. But you think of people like Nietzsche, and you know, he composed a bunch of music and he painted, and you think, okay, why would somebody who is so deeply involved in philosophy think about doing that? It's because, like you said, it's so important to explore these different levels of communication. And you know, I just walking through this gallery down in Sydney, I was just taken aback by I particularly like the earlier Australian artists. I haven't developed my contemporary art goggles, I guess, at this point. But yeah, you see some of these paintings and you think, they get it exactly right, and you can feel it. You can feel
Yes.
something there, and it's kind of a freaky ability that we have, right?
Magic. Yeah,
Yeah,
magic.
absolutely. Well, hey, Sharon, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for spending the time. I'm so grateful to you for, doing this every month, because it's always a refreshing conversation, and I need my fix of Shazza. So I
Likewise.
appreciate you.
Oh, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey there, YouTubers. I just wanted to let you know that if you love this episode and you'd like many more just like it, then you can head to patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. There you'll get access to exclusive episodes that haven't been released yet, as well as many other benefits. Also, if you'd like to work one-on-one with me in my coaching practice, then you can head to simonjedrew.com/coaching. Talk to you soon.